A year ago, I made a 30-second short in Rough Animator, and my goal was to show that with technology and a little bit of money now, we can do things so much quicker than we used to be able to, which really opens the gate for animators all over the world to be doing some pretty cool stuff on small-scale budgets. Now, I'm working with a 5-year-old iPad Pro. This is the first one that ever came out, and the whole reason that I bought this thing when it came out was Rough Animator. I think this software is incredible personally, and so I want to help you guys find some of the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way to do things well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump in and check out the settings. One of the first things that I hear people saying is that Rough Animator runs a little slow or laggy for them. I keep mine at full. With the iPad Pro, even the really old one, it seems to do pretty well. But if you're finding yourself struggling, try half or a quarter. That can help you out. Next, the button settings. The little buttons on the top of the iPad, those guys can be set to flip through frames, which is my favorite thing. You can get a nice little flip action going by just tapping your buttons. You have a few other options here: undo, redo, backward, forward, forward, backward. You have your settings however you want them to. The next thing to look at here is onion skin. I don't really mess with that, but you could if you wanted to. This one is very important. Pen only mode. Ignore finger touch on canvas. That is always on for me. Moving into minimum brush size pressure and minimum brush opacity pressure, which is really hard to say if you try. These settings are things that I would fiddle with as you get more comfortable with your brushes. I like to fine tune them based on projects or things I'm working on because, you know, sometimes you want a line that's going to go from thin to thick and really thin. I do love that Rough Animator brushes feel like they can taper off into nothing, just like a pencil. My interface is still right-handed. You can make it left-handed if you want, but I have my interface scaled to 50%. I like to keep allow pinch rotation of canvas and zoom rotation on. Those settings will just kind of override the ignoring finger settings that you've got going, so I can draw with my pencil and move with my hand. That's a thing that I really love. Once you're set up and ready to go there, let's dive in. Brushes are going to be pretty obvious. We'll come back to those. Eraser, very similar to brush. You've got right here, brushes have your sample, pressure sensitivity, randomized rotation, size, opacity, spacing, smoothing. The opacity is a little funky. We'll come back to that. Here are some important settings to pay attention to. Draws in front, draws behind, draws inside. Those do exactly what you think they would. Let's test them out. Here's a line in front. We'll go to draws behind and make it red. Draws behind. And now if I do draws inside, we can make this one green. Look at that. Exactly what you would want them to do. 2-finger undo, 3-finger redo, just like every software you'd want on your iPad. So it's perfect. A lot of it's intuitive, it's stuff you're used to. The paint bucket tool, you'll see fill expand, fill blur, tolerance, sample all layers, this and above, or sample this layer. These settings are super helpful when doing some of your coloring in. I like to start out definitely on a base layer. I do my sketch, as you can see here, and then I come over top and I do my fill. Generally what I'll do after that, and don't worry, we'll come back to layers, is I'll duplicate layer timing to blank drawings. Now I've created my color layer. So I keep my colors separate because that helps me out when I'm kind of building back. I can fill in, let's make him red. And you see, it's gonna be really simple. At that point, my color and my lines are on separate layers. I can do a lot of different things there. I can draw within these, I can draw over top. You again can come back and use draws inside and do things like shading. Now, this is destructive. I know a lot of you are gonna point that out. So what I like to do is before I come in and do any shading or anything like this, I duplicate my project. There may be other ways to do this, and honestly, I'll keep looking into it. But I think this is the easiest, most natural, and for me, that's why I love Rough Animator. You can jump in, do what you want quickly and efficiently, and have quick and good results. So with that in mind, Keeping color on separate layers from your lines is always going to benefit you in the long run. So after the paint bucket, we've got the lasso. This is cool. It works a lot like what you would expect. You can circle, you can rotate, you can move. If you throw it off screen, it's gone. 2 fingers, it's back. You also have some more specific tools if you need to X translate in a very specific number, or Y translate, or rotate. These tools will help you out a lot. Flip horizontal, flip vertical. You've got everything you need to create some weird and great art. Again, I just 2-finger tap to undo, 3 redoes. So everything works kind of like you want it to, and that looks great. One thing that you might not know, you can bounce between softwares. This is Procreate, for those of you who don't recognize it. I can actually come over and copy layer. Then if I come back into Rough Animator with my lasso tool and paste, let's see if we can see it. It's hard to see, but see that splotchy? That's my Procreate layer. You can copy and paste back and forth between softwares. This can be incredibly useful if you're looking to get some effects heavy shots or things like that. So once you get into the timeline, you'll notice I have 3 layers here. Getting layers and extra layers is fairly simple. Naming them, you just tap the name and you can type in whatever you want. Naming is important if you're going to have a lot of layers, but one thing that I would advise is not having a lot of shots. When I did the Robin Hood short, I broke everything up into different shots to keep things easier on my end. Here's an example of my shot of Robin from the intro.
My arrows are big. My arrows are small.
With this shot, you'll see I still have all my sketch layers. I have my audio file. To get an audio file in, all you have to do is go up here. You have all of your export, import, everything that you need is right here. There are also some fun settings that have been added like resize or crop expand. Make sure you read the warnings in those because some of them can change things. You'll survive for the most part. Test things out, try it out, see what happens. Now with this project, rather than exporting videos because I was compositing on my computer, I exported PNG sequences. When you look at this, you might not see that. It's still there. Export video and PNG sequences right there. You can also kick GIFs right out of it. So in the timeline, like I said, keeping your color separate from your lines is a very important thing if you're gonna wanna be doing any color editing, any effects, anything like that. And it's just a good habit to be in because you don't trap yourself in having something that's unchangeable. I've got 3 layers here currently. The background, that's gonna extend as far as you want it to. In each of these layers, you can choose how long or short you want it to be right here in the drawing duration. One really fun thing is if I want my drawing durations to all stay the same in my layers, right here, I have settings for that. Independent, sync layers, and maintain overall duration. So if I change between those, you'll notice that as I change, it's gonna keep the overall duration exactly the same by changing the frame in front of it and making sure that I still have the same amount of animation going on. On the flip side, if I go back to sync layers, my layers are gonna change equally. This is good once you've colored frames in and need things to stay pretty consistent. That happens a lot. This feature is relatively new and I love it. So outside of that, you have your normal timeline that you would expect down here. You have your flipping, but again, I like to set my buttons so I can kind of flip through with those. You also have a little scroll wheel here if you need to go a little bit faster and check your stuff out. Look at those eyes coming right out of his head. So that's a basic overview of the timeline. You also have these settings up here. These are good to look out for. You can label drawings. I don't know that I've ever labeled a drawing, but it might not be a bad idea. Let's try it. 1. Look, puts a name right on it. That helps you out. We're all learning something today. Right here you have an option to delete drawing. Obviously again, 2 fingers undoes it. And now it looks like it named that one 1. This is something I'll have to look into. Again, this is a new feature to me, and I'm really sorry that it's going in the video, but now you know it too. Right here, we have a make cycle button. Here we can move frames around. This will change the order of it, and edit multiple. Edit multiple, this is one of the coolest things in the timeline. Let's just throw a few drawings on really quick, just for fun. Let's say that's a circle, let's say that's a circle, let's say that's a circle. Now I want to throw some things in between. Add drawing, add after, and a little circle, add drawing, add after, a little circle. Skip over, add drawing, add after, got a little circle, and drawing, add after, got a little circle. And delete this one. Oh, I still have my sync layers on. I'm gonna go back to independent so that I can move my layers about as I want to. Now, there we go, it's got something. But let's say that I'm looking at this and thinking, I want that movement to be a little different across the board. Is there a way I can look at everything at once? You know, I can go back with my lasso and I can move and I can fidget and I can scroll. The other thing that I can do is I can go to edit multiple. Now I'm gonna go to the first frame here and hit edit multiple, drag this to the end. Now I can see all of my frames. I wanna move things out. I'm gonna move this. It's gonna kind of slow in up here and it's gonna drop fast there. Now hit edit multiple again. Applying changes. Look at that. Pretty crazy. So I know this isn't a beautiful animation, but the thing to note is editing multiple frames at one time is a pretty cool option, especially if you're needing to correct arcs on a character, in a hand movement, in a head movement, things like that. This is a huge feature for me. Maybe you guys have seen it in other places. I have not seen it in something that is this accessible. $4.99 for this software, guys, and it's got this. Come on. Next thing I want to show you guys is cycles. So once I get to the end of here, add drawing, add after, and up here, make cycle. Now your cycle settings are all here. You can choose repeat previous and tell it the frames you want it to repeat. And you'll notice this little green box up top is extending back and forth on the frames that I have selected until it reaches the end of my duration. So I've got it repeating all of these frames and I'm gonna play through, but my cycle's not long enough. It's repeating 19 frames. I need about 19 frames there for it to go twice. Now, another thing that can happen if I set my cycle up 19 frames, so what is that? Really bad at math. Let's try 38 frames. Now, I can tell the cycle that I want it to go forward and backward, and that's gonna ping pong it. And unfortunately, guys, at this point, I found that a lot of my footage died from this section. But one thing I want you to notice is that you can actually mess with that backward forward setting. You can ping pong your drawings and you can mess with your XY position and scale. And the cool thing that that's going to do is across the movement of your animation, you can have things look like they're walking to or away from the screen just by cycling through and scaling and moving across. It's what it's going to do if you change your XY position by 100 in each and your scale to 50%. What you'll notice is it will go up 100 pixels across each time that the cycle restarts, and it will start at that next point and at that next scale, and each cycle will progressively do that to the level that you've got it set, which is a very cool setting if you're looking to do some background animation, some walking away, things like that. It's really cool. And once you've done all that, you can convert your cycle to drawings, which is awesome because then you can fill things in normally and adjust if you want to tweak little movements or motions in that cycle. The last thing I want to talk about is brushes. This one's not anything crazy, but I do have some brushes saved. When you want to save a brush, all you have to do is press and hold and then save the new brush preset. I have big, nice, red, and small. These tend to be the things I use when I'm animating something quick and rough, which is most of what I do. Now, if I wanted something a little cleaner, you can do that as well. Your eraser, same setting. If you press and hold, you can save. I don't really care what my eraser looks like. It just has to take things off the screen. But if I want to go in and change my brush, I like to bring in PNGs. You'll notice I have quite a few that I've brought in. I think you start with these 3, and then from there, I've added my own. I like using something with a little bit of tooth to it. I feel like it looks a little more natural. Currently, I'm using this PNG that I made in Procreate that we saw earlier. This guy's pretty huge, it's blotchy, it's moved around. This way, when it kind of rotates and moves with the brush, it feels really natural, almost pencil-like. So I really like that quality in a brush. But you can do some weird things as well. I have this dot brush. It looks like it's a line here. Doesn't look like anything crazy, but if I change my spacing up to, let's try 40. I'm now getting a much more textury line. One of the tricks with brushes that I did not know when I first jumped in is that your opacity actually seems to work on a per sample basis rather than on the entire line. So my entire line is obviously not a 45% opacity right now. I'll drop back down to 2. My line looks like it's 100%. Now each sample is coming in at a lower percentage than that, but because they stack together, it looks like a full and thick line. So keep an eye on that. Sometimes with smoothing, that does make a difference. A full 100% opacity line can look like it's not actually smooth, whereas a 45% line can actually have much more smoothness going on. So you just kind of have to play with those settings. Smoothing, I like to keep around 2 for sketching. This is just enough that you don't really feel the slide of the screen on your iPad, but it's not going to impede you from drawing quickly. You'll notice that it lags a little bit there. This isn't a huge problem for me when I'm working at that level. If I didn't want any lag, I can move back down to 0, and I'm moving fairly quickly. Zooming in and out will also affect how quickly your line moves. Zoomed out, you can go fairly quickly, or zoomed in, you might have a little bit of delay. This doesn't tend to be a huge issue if you're really working a line or if you're kind of working your way through something. But it's different for a lot of people, so you gotta find what you love. One really cool thing, I like that I can go from a nothing line to a thick line in one stroke. I find a lot of other softwares can't do that nearly as clean as Rough Animator. I don't know what engine is working in there, what it's doing, or why it's so good, but I can't find that anywhere on the iPad. So for me, in sketching and in drawing, this is invaluable because everything just feels so natural. So I'm gonna jump in here now. I'm gonna heavy line this eye, and I have my smoothing bumped way up for this. This is because when you're drawing on glass, things are just a little bit different than paper. So you don't want to fight that slide. You don't want to feel like you're kind of working against the technology. You want it to work with you. If I come in, and I do apologize, guys. I draw a little heavy-handed, so I have to kind of remind myself what I'm doing there. I'm going to come back, and you see how quickly I can undo and redo things. But it's nice because you can come in and do a lot of this stuff, and then I can also come in and lay fine details. But then in that same line, without even changing my brush, I'm right back to adding in that big stuff. You'll notice because my smoothing is so high, some of my lines will change from how I originally drew them. Unfortunately, that is the case. If you're going to want perfect translations of the lines you're laying, you're going to want to knock your smoothing back down. 3 is probably the maximum to maintain a correct line with exactly what you're drawing. So that's a whole lot of things that I've shown you guys. Hopefully some of them are useful. There's a lot more, but I know that a lot of this is just tricky stuff to learn if you're diving in and don't understand the software. I just wanted to show you guys some of the reasons that I love Rough Animator and hope that you can enjoy it as much as I do. It's incredibly affordable for the software that it is, and it is truly excellent. if you guys check out my video Robin Hood, you can see an example of where I pushed very quick turnaround to try and see what I could do with just the iPad. It's not beautiful, it's not high art, but it did make me really proud that the entire thing could be done on an iPad. And in the time that's happened since, Rough Animator has included a lot of the settings that I've showed you guys today. It gets better all the time. Check out Jacob Kafka, Weird Hat on Twitter. He's always sharing updates and things that are going on in there. And again, this is just an incredible software at an incredible deal. We live in a time where animation is very accessible. So if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, Cartoonographer. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on YouTube. Let me know.